Alright, today we are talking about the trigonometry chapter. Alright, so trig was always something I didn't like, but we're going to cover almost all of it in under 10 minutes, so here we go. Alright, so first of all, this is the unit circle, alright? Just like a regular circle, if you go all the way around, there are 360 degrees, alright? But we can also measure that in something called radians. So if you go all the way around the unit circle in radians, it's 2 pi. So there's a formula for converting degrees to radians or the other way. It's really simple. So say we want to convert 360 degrees or all the way around the circle into radians, right? Here's what you do. You put 360 over 1, because that's how you write it as a fraction, and then you multiply by pi over 180. So when you do that, all right, here's what happens. All right, you just simplify the fraction. So obviously 360 divided by 180 is 2, and then just put the pi, 2 pi. Alright, so then say we want to convert 2 pi into degrees, same thing. So put 2 pi over 1, and then instead of multiplying by pi over 180, we multiply by 180 over pi. So here's what happens. We have a pi on the top and a pi on the bottom. They're going to cancel. 2 times 180 is 360. So that's how you convert degrees to radians. Really important. Alright? So after that, before we get to how the unit circle works, we have sine, cosine, and tangent. This is SOHCAHTOA. It's a mnemonic to remembering how to do trigonometry. So first of all, you have to be able to label a right triangle. This only works if there's a right triangle. So here's a right triangle. The degree right, or the side right across the 90-degree angle, I always draw an arrow, is always the hypotenuse. That's easy. Alright, the hard part's knowing the other side. So they depend on what your reference angle is. We say theta for the reference angle. Alright, in our example right here, theta is always right there. But for this, theta could be here or there. So if theta is here, here's how it works. Adjacent means touching. So this side right here is touching the reference angle, so that would be the adjacent. The side that's not touching is the opposite. Alright, after that it's very easy. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So just label the hypotenuse, and then remember, whatever, if this side were the reference angle, that would be the adjacent. Adjacent means touching the reference angle, opposite means not. Alright, so then if you look up here, this is how it works in the unit circle. So this is our differentiable point. Alright, whatever your point is, that tells us the distances of x and y. Okay, because you have x is the distance you go over, y is the distance you go up. So when given a point, you can calculate sine, cosine, and tangent based off the point. The hypotenuse never changes. It's always 1, because no matter what, this circle has a radius of 1. So the hypotenuse will always be 1. Okay. So your x value is cosine, your sine value is y. I remember that because just like x comes before y in the alphabet, c comes before s in the alphabet. Alright, so if you need more help on the unit circle, you can let me know. This is just a general overview of trig to help you get going. Alright, so after that, what we're going to talk about is trig functions. Okay, so I'm just going over sine and cosine. Tangent is not talked about much in the chapter. If you want, we can talk about it. So with trig functions, these are called the parent functions. So we have sine here and we have cosine here. So before I talk about them, I'm going to explain important terminology in trig. So amplitude is the distance from the midline to the highest or lowest point. So if you look, the amplitude would be right here. Alright, the distance from 0 to the highest point is 1. And same thing down here, from 0 to here is 1. So the amplitude would be 1, okay? It's always 1 to start out. These are called parent functions. Just like sine, this is the sine function. Cosine also has an amplitude of 1, alright? So that's amplitude. After that, we have period. That's the distance that it takes for the horizontal distance it takes for a function to repeat itself. So you can see right here the amplitude of this function. So it starts here, it goes up. How long does it take to get back to where it started? Right there. So in this case, the amplitude would be, the period would be 2 pi. And the way you find the period is, the formula is 2 pi over b. B is the second number you see in the equation. Alright, just like we have a squared, b squared, c squared. B is the second value in a trig equation. Alright, so the period, as you can see in a sine function, starts out at 2 pi. Same thing with a cosine function. It takes till 2 pi to repeat itself. When's the next time it starts to get to that point? Here. So that's the period is this distance right here, and you can see it's 2 pi, just like over here, 2 pi. All right. So then what you need to notice is, do you guys see how in the sine function, it's very important the difference. Sine starts going through 0, 0. Cosine, and it starts at the midline. Okay, very important that you know sine starts at the midline. When you're at the value of 0 on cosine, you're starting at a maximum value. All right, so sine starts at 0, 0. Cosine actually starts at 0, 1, which is a max. So that's a big difference between them. All right, and then lastly we have the midline. That's the line that divides the function in half. So the midline is right here in this equation. That's the midline. Sorry, I didn't do the best job going over it. And cosine, this is the midline. All right, so those are the important terminologies you need to know and the major differences. So remember, sine, they both have, starting out, these are called parent functions. They both have a period of 2 pi, as you can see, and they both have an amplitude of 1 to start. All right, so now we got to go over what we do with different phase shifts in the equation. This is when it gets a little hard, and the best way to practice that is, I think, Khan Academy. So I'm going to show you how you can work on trig and con. So just like I can write on my screen, if you click right here, you can write on Khan Academy. So let's figure out what this sine function looks like. All right, so first of all right, our amplitude, if you look, there's no number here, so there's actually a 1 that we don't see. So our amplitude is -1. No matter what, you can't have a negative distance, so it's still an amplitude of 1. So if you guys remember, sine starts out like this going through the middle, so that's good, right? All right, then our midline is always the last number. So whatever the last number is, the d value, this is our midline. 7 is midline. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, all right, because that's the midline, that means that this value right here is going to have to be at 7. All right, that's the middle of our equation. All right, so after we have the midline, what we need to do is figure out the period, or how long it takes to repeat itself. So this is our b value. So our a value is 1, our b value is pi over 8. So if you guys remember, the way you figure out the period, the time it takes for the function to repeat itself, is you do 2 pi divided by the b value. So 2 pi divided by pi over 8. So how do I do 2 pi divided by pi over 8? Here's how you do it. Write 2 pi as a fraction, so 2 pi over 1, and then multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of pi over 8 is 8 over pi. All right, so then let's simplify this, okay? The pi top and bottom cancel. 2 times 8 is 16. All right, that means it takes 16 units for the function to completely repeat itself. We don't need that though. We just need to figure out when the next low point will be. We know it's a low point because we have a negative sign. Negative means you go down going right. All right, so how do we figure that out? Well, it's divide by 4, because when you divide by 4, you figure out when the next low or high point is. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. All right, that means that x equals 4, we're going to have our next low point. So what is the low point? It's very easy. 7 is our midline, and we know our amplitude is -1. So that means from 7, the next low point is going to be 1 lower. So after you get your equation in all set up, so that's how you do sine, you just hit check. All right, so if you get it right, it says good work. All right, next question. All right, we got another sine. We'll go through one more, and then I want to make sure we get a cosine in. So go through this one a little quicker. All right, so for this one, we have -5 sine. All right, so always start out with the midline. So the midline is -3, so I'm going to go down 3, 2, 3. All right, so then after that, what I need is to figure out when it's going to repeat itself next. So if you guys remember, it's 2 pi over b. So the b value is the second number. All right, so what we're going to end up doing, I'm doing this one quicker, is 2 pi divided by 1/7. So just like last time, we're going to multiply by 7 over 1. So 2 pi times 7 is 14 pi. Sorry, 14 pi. So if you guys remember, how do you figure out what it would be? You divide by 4. All right, so we end up with 14 divided by 4. So that will tell us when the function is going to repeat itself. So 14 divided by 4 is 3.5 pi. So that's when it will have its next high or low point. All right, so in this, because it's negative, we know it's going to be a low point. So that means at 3.5 pi, so here's 3, here's 3.5 pi, we're going to have our next low point, and I know it's low because the negative in front says when we're going right, we go down first. All right, so how much lower it is? It's going to have to be 5 lower because that's our amplitude. So I start at -3. If I go down 5, right there. So let's check it. All right, next. All right, good. We got a cosine. So if you guys remember, the difference between sine and cosine, sine starts out crossing here. Cosine actually starts with a maximum value. So I like to just move the graph so it starts out as the parent function. So the parent function of cosine looks like that. After we get it all set, then we can start to manipulate it. This would actually not be it. It goes down too far. But, all right, here we go. Let's get started. So first of all, start with our midline. Our midline is 6. So remember, the midline is not going to be at 0 on a cosine function. So it's actually going to be this point. So I need to move this down to 6. All right. So here we go. There is 6. So that is our midline. I'm sorry. Midline would actually be up here. So, all right, once we have our midline, what we need to do is figure out, and remember, our amplitude is going to be 1 because there's no number here, there's always a 1. Now we need to figure out when the function is going to repeat itself. So, same equation, 2 pi over b. So for 2 pi over b, we're going to have 2 pi divided by pi over 12. So we're just going to multiply by the reciprocal, so 12 over pi. So when we do that, the pi's cancel. 2 times 12 is 24. So if you guys remember, the way you find the next high or low point is you divide by 4, and we get 6. So that means my next point is going to be at 6. All right? So if it is at 6, here we go. I'm going to slide this over to -6. All right, and then actually the cosine, all right, should be 1 above it. So it would look like this. And how do I know it's 1 above it? Well, I know it's 1 above it because it is amplitude of 1 that we can't see. So then when you get your answer, click check, and that's it. So that's a general overview of how to do trig, guys. If you have any